This is a presentation of the City of Saginaw's 2024-2025 proposed budget. Copies of the proposed budget are available for viewing at the City Clerk's office at 1315 South Washington Avenue. It's also going to be available on the city's website at www.saginaw-mi.com. First council meeting to discuss the budget or review the budget is City Council session on May 6th, with public hearing on May 20th and potential adoption date scheduled for May 20th. Email or citizen comments can be directed to 989-759-1784 or ybland@saginaw-mi.com. The 25 proposed budget continues to reflect the city's commitment to providing quality services to our residents while preserving our organization's long-term financial viability. The total citywide budget is projected to be $233.92 million. This represents a $55.69 million or 31% increase from the previous year. The general fund budget for fiscal year 25 is projected to be $44.55 million. This represents an increase of $4.2 million or 10.66% from the prior year resources of $40.26 million. Non-general fund budgets account for approximately 81% of the total citywide budget. There are 4 areas in which you see the largest increase for the fiscal year 25 budget. The American Rescue Plan Act Fund will increase over $37.5 million as the City Council approved the allocation of ARPA funds during fiscal year 24. Funds were carried over into the next fiscal year, and this increase will be approximately $14.45 million from the previous year. New in fiscal year 25 budget is the State of Michigan Saginaw Medical Facility Fund. During the current year, the city received the State of Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Development grant in the amount of $30.3 million. This new fund will account for the activities that will occur with the development of a medical facility in the city of Saginaw. For fiscal year 25, it will be $12 million. The Water Operation and Maintenance Fund increases $11.89 million. The Department of Water and Wastewater Services continues to budget for the elevated storage tank project, the lead and copper galvanizing line replacement project, and the Birch Run parallel water mains. A portion of these expenditures will be offset by federal and state grant funds. The Sewer Operation and Maintenance Fund increases 19%, or $6.11 million. This increase is directly related to the River Crossing project and the Hancock CSO Basin repairs at 100 North Hamilton. For fiscal year 25 budget also reflects changes to salaries for all benefits as City Council approved a collective bargaining agreement in late fiscal year 23. The city will also experience an increase in several of the internal service funds, such as Technical Service IS, because of the city moving towards a cloud-based platform, the motor pool operations, as the cost of motor vehicle supplies and motor vehicle repairs continue to increase, and the self-insurance fund over $400,000 due to the increase in insurance rates nationwide. So let's take a look at the budget from the resource allocation position. The breakdown of the total $233.92 million is represented in the pie chart, where general fund represents 19% of the total citywide budget. Special revenue funds represents 34% of the total budget. And the largest part of the budget is represented in the enterprise funds, which consists of boat launch fund, sewer and water operation and maintenance funds, which represents about 43% of the total budget. Internal service funds represent over 4% of the total budget, and fiduciary funds represent less than 0.01 of the total budget. This chart represents the change in tax mills over the last 5 years. And as you can see, city operating millage will be 6.7368, with the police and fire special assessments remaining at 7.5. The total tax mill will be 14.2368. This is a projected decrease from the fiscal year 24, whereas in the previous fiscal years from 2020 through 2023 remains the same. For fiscal year 25, taxes are levied at 14.2368 mils. So let's see how the budget for fiscal year 25 aligns with the city's strategic plan. And as you can see from this chart here, that you're seeing an increase for most of the different areas. Economic development of the urban core increases to 13.69 million. Neighborhood revitalization increases to 10.34 million. Arts, culture, and recreation has a slight increase of 482,000. Police and fire increases to 29.45 million, and utility infrastructure increases to 38.09 million. Moving on to the general fund representing over 19% of the total citywide budget. This graph shows a historical analysis of the budgets from the general fund portion to the citywide portion. Last year, the general fund was 40.26 million, and citywide it was 178.28. For fiscal year 25, it'll be 44.56 million, with a total citywide budget of 233.92 million. General fund revenues, starting on page 65 through 79. Again, the general fund represents 19% of the total budget with a budget of 44.55 million. This represents a $4.29 million increase, or almost 11% from the previous years. As in the previous years, the three main revenue sources for this fund are property taxes, state shared revenue, and income taxes. Property taxes will be 1.47 million for fiscal year 25, and this is over a 1% increase, or $44,000, or actually 1% decrease from fiscal year 2024. The reduction in property tax revenues is attributed to the recognizing 86,000 of property chargebacks for during the COVID pandemic. Saginaw County did not conduct foreclosures. Foreclosures has resumed, and the city will account for the property chargebacks. State share revenue is over 22% of the general fund revenues and are projected to be 9.9 million. This is an increase of $704,000 from fiscal year 24. This increase will be realized in the additional funds received for public safety, as well as a higher allocation for the city, village, township revenues. Income taxes will be 16.08 million, and this is almost a 7% increase from fiscal year 24. And the increase in income tax, which represents 36% of the general fund revenue, is primarily due to an increase in the projected pay rates within the city of Saginaw. Grant revenues for fiscal year 25 are expected to increase almost 78%, or $1.9 million. The total general fund grant allocation will be $4.5 million. The city is a recipient of the Department of Housing and Urban Development Community Project Fund. The original amount of this grant was $3 million. For fiscal year 25, city administration budgeted $2 million for the burial of utility lines. Additionally, Neighborhood Services and Inspections received a grant from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation to assist with the zoning ordinance update. The fiscal year 25 grant budget reflects a $37,500 increase for the zoning update. License permits and fees will be $2.8 million for fiscal year 25, and this represents an increase of $22,547. Charge for services are $1.3 million for fiscal year 25. And for this category actually decreases 2.74%, or almost 3%. This reduction is due to a decrease in interment services, marker and bases, and grave spaces. These revenues are higher in the previous year due to the COVID pandemic. Fines and forfeitures are expected to increase $1,600 from the previous year, and there will be additional revenues realized in this category from the transfer affidavit fines. Interest and rents are $863,974 for 25. This increase will be realized in the cemetery endowments and cemetery interest revenues. Reimbursement revenues increase $475,220 for fiscal year 25, and this represents almost a 15% increase. And this increase is largely associated with the increase to the indirect cost allocation in the general fund. Other revenues increased $147,996, or almost 43%. Total revenues equate to $494,277. There will be an operating transfer in from other funds of $123,337. And the operating transfer in consists of the allocation from the Community Development Block Grant for community police officers and the repayment of the general fund from the boat launch for the purchase of the kiosk system at the Russ Lee Street boat launch. And in fiscal year 25, we will not be budgeting for fund balance to be appropriated in this fund. So moving on to general fund expenditures. This graph shows all the appropriation centers of the general fund: general government, fiscal services, community public safety, police and fire, neighborhood services and inspections, public services, and other general fund expenditures. And as you can see, similar to on the revenue side, on the expense side, you will see an increase of $4.29 million. And we're going to be looking at each of the different appropriation centers. Starting on page 80 to 89 is your general government, offices of the general government. And the offices of general government, which represents over 8% of the total general fund expenditures, consists of city council, city manager, SGTV, human resources, city clerk and elections, city attorney, office of management and budget, marketing. For fiscal year 25, the budget for these offices is projected to be $3.71 million. This is an increase from the previous year of $503,000. This increase is due to the across-the-board increases to salaries and healthcare benefits, increased general liability insurance costs due to the current national market conditions, increases to information charges with the city moving to a cloud-based platform. In the Office of Human Resources, there's an increase in labor professional services. In the election office, this budget increases significantly due to them having an August primary and a November presidential election. In the Office of Management and Budget, 15% of the Saginaw Economic Development Coordinator position will be reallocated from the Community Development Block Grant Fund, and a Budget Analyst 2 will be added to the personnel complement. On pages 90 to 96, you will find the Department of Fiscal Services. And the Department of Fiscal Services represents almost 8% of the total budget and will be $3.41 million for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of 0.58%, less than 1%. This increase is tied to the purchasing division moving to digitalizing their files in fiscal year 25, which is offset by the savings from reallocating part of the deputy treasurer's salary and benefits to sewer and water operation and maintenance customer accounting. As it relates to personnel changes, the Department of Fiscal Services will add a property appraiser 2 to the personnel complement. This will be offset by the elimination of assessing technician, as all the staff have acquired the necessary credentials to be promoted from into the property appraiser position. On pages 97 to 106, you will find Community Public Safety Police. Community Public Safety Police represents almost 37% of the total general fund expenditures and will be $16.26 million for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of $985,000 from fiscal year 24. The increase in community public safety is due to the budget also reflecting salary and benefit increases as outlined in the collective bargaining agreements. Retiree health care costs will increase 15% from the previous fiscal year. And in fiscal year 25, a deputy police chief will be added to the personnel complement. This position being added will assist with the succession planning of the department. Operating services will increase over $58,000, and this increase will be realized in the increases to information management charges, motor pool charges, and increases to general liability insurance. Capital outlay for the department includes the purchase of a vehicle in the amount of $47,000 through the municipal buyback program with McDonald Ford. This is offset by revenues on the general fund side. On pages 107 to 113, you will find Community Public Safety Fire. And Community Public Safety Fire represents a little over 22% of the total general fund expenditures, equating to $9.85 million. This is an increase of $255,000 or almost 3%. This increase is attributed to increases in general liability insurance, information management charges, increases to dues and training and development. This department will also realize salary and active healthcare benefit increases, as well as a 15% increase to retiree healthcare. On pages 114 to 118, you will find the Department of Neighborhood Services and Inspections. And the Department of Neighborhood Services and Inspections represents almost 5% of the general fund expenditures and will be $2.07 million for fiscal year 2025. This represents an increase of $160,543 from the previous fiscal year. Outside of the across-the-board salary and healthcare benefit increases, this department adds a community development specialist to the Planning and Zoning Division. Operating services increased by $45,413. The majority of the increase will be realized in the allocation of funds from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation for the zoning ordinance update. There is a corresponding revenue source for this project. The department will also see increases in the general liability insurance, information management charges, and motor pool charges. These increases will be offset by a reduction in miscellaneous expenditures due to the payoff of the vehicle lease payments for inspection divisions, and a decrease in professional services agreement for the parking operations due to the change in the parking companies from Passport to Cardinal. On page 119 to 130, you will find the Department of Public Services. And the General Fund Department of Public Services, representing almost little more than 15% of the general fund budget, will be $6.79 million. And this is an increase of $2.29 million from the previous year. This increase is largely due to the across-the-board salary and healthcare benefit increases and funds required for the McDonald Ford Municipal Buyback Program, which has offsetting revenues. And the largest increase to this department is the city also receiving the HUD Community Project Fund grants for $3 million in fiscal year 24, of which $2 million is allocated for use in 25. The last department of the general fund is other general fund expenditures, and that's found on page 131. Other general fund expenditures represents about 6% of the general fund expenditures and will be $2.45 million for fiscal year 25. This is a 3% increase from the previous year. The primary increase in these offices will be realized in the retiree healthcare and Saginaw Housing Commission divisions due to the 15% increase in retiree healthcare costs, and in the operating transfer out divisions due to the repayment of cost allocation to the local street funds. These increases will be offset by the reduction of GIS division as the city evaluates the distribution of these costs. The next fund type that we're going to discuss is the special revenue funds. And special revenue funds accounts for proceeds from specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. Special revenue funds represents a little more than 34% of the total citywide budget, equates to $79.59 million. These funds increase in total by $32.59 million, or almost 70%. Starting off with major and local street funds, which is on page 132 to 158. The major street funds will realize a net increase of $1.67 million. This increase will be largely realized in an increase of projects planned citywide. Personnel also increased due to across-the-board increases to salary and benefits. The local street funds will be $2.24 million in fiscal year 25, and this will be a net increase of $29,942. The increase will be realized in personnel services of $116,000 due to the across-the-board increases to salaries and benefit costs. This will be offset by a decrease in operating expenses of $87,260 due to a decrease in local projects for fiscal year 25. Moving on to the rubbish collection fund, which is on page 159 to 171, the rubbish collection fund budget will be $5.18 million for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of $216,000 from the approved 2024 budget. For fiscal year 25, the household rubbish fee will remain the same as in the previous fiscal year at $240. Revenues from household rubbish fees will be $2.82 million for fiscal year 25, and this is actually a decrease of $132,000. On the expenditure side, the largest increase will be realized in operating expenses. This is largely due to increases in general liability insurance and indirect costs citywide. Miscellaneous expenditures will decrease $21,268 for fiscal year 25, and this is due to a decrease in the debt service payment. Personnel services increases $129,861 due to across-the-board increases to salary and benefits, while capital outlay will decrease by $97,052. In the previous fiscal year, the department made several large capital outlay purchases that will not occur in 2025. However, the department does plan to purchase a front load packer and a truck mount alternator. Moving on to public safety fund, which starts on page 172 to 177. The Public Safety Millage Fund will be $3.26 million for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of $5,984 from the previous fiscal year. This increase is due to increase in real property tax revenues. To offset the increase in revenues will be the same increase to expenditures for salary and benefits for 20 police officers and 10 firefighter personnel. Please note that the levy was renewed in February of 2024. On page 178 to 189, you will find the public safety grant funds. The total public safety grant funds for fiscal year 25 will be $74,596, and this represents a decrease of $65,082. Looking at the funds individually, the police training grant is $14,000 for fiscal year 25. This is a $5,000 increase, and this increase is due to an increase in the state grant for training and development. The Department of Justice will be zero for fiscal year 2025. The department is waiting on the release of funds, which will occur around September of the year. A budget adjustment will be completed at the time that we receive the notification. The Saginaw County TAPS grant will increase $3,252 from fiscal year 24. This increase is attributed to an increase in grant funds. In 2025, the Police Justice Grant will decrease $38,000, and this is due to the expected reduction in the grant funds. Page 194 to 201, you will find the Anderson Enrichment Center and Saginaw Arts and Enrichment Commission. The Anderson Enrichment Center is projected to be $99,000 for 2025. This is a $2,394 increase. This increase will be realized in personnel costs. The Arts Enrichment Commission is projected to be $204,000, which is the same as in the previous fiscal year. TIFA, LDFA, DDA, and Brownfield authorities can be found on pages 202 to 207. The Brownfield Authority Fund will increase by $9,621, and this is due to an increase in real property tax value within the district. The Downtown Development Authority 2011 fund revenues will be $920,087, and this is an increase of $748,238. This increase is attributed to the Downtown Development Authority receiving a $1 million grant from the State of Michigan Environmental Great Lakes Energy Remediation Redevelopment Division for the facilitation and redevelopment of a new Riverfront High School campus in downtown Saginaw at 1741 North Niagara Street. For fiscal year 25, $750,000 will be budgeted for this grant. Next, we're moving on to the Community Development Block Grant Funds. The Community Development Block Grant Funds can be found on page 207 to 225. The Community Development Block Grant Fund related funds will be $5.03 million for fiscal year 25. This represents an overall increase of $402,254. Looking at these funds individually, the CDBG fund will be $2.26 million for 2025, and this is a decrease of $260,377. This reduction is due to a decrease in federal entitlement monies. CDBG Residential Loan Fund will increase $146,826. This increase is due to an increase in the amount of carry forward funds. The home program will be $1.58 million for fiscal year 25. This represents a $876,305 increase. This increase is due to receiving home ARP grant dollars. The Saginaw Economic Development Loan Fund, budgeted at $441,000, will decrease $360,500 from the previous fiscal year. This reduction will be realized in the amount of fund balance utilized to balance the fund. New for fiscal year 2025 is our National Opioid Settlement Fund, which can be found on page 226 to 227. This fund accounts for funds received due to the National Opioid Settlement, which is a major legal agreement between the state and local governments and opioid manufacturers and distributors. The settlement was meant to compensate for the harm caused by the opioid crisis and will provide up to $26 billion for opioid prevention and treatment program. For fiscal year 25, the budget for this fund will be $168,288. At this point, as the city works with others, funds budgeted will be utilized for the community public safety, fire, medical first responder training, which includes opioid overdose. The American Rescue Plan Fund, ARPA, can be found on page 228 to 230. The American Rescue Plan Fund was established to account for the American Rescue Plan Act grant dollars. The City of Saginaw, through the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, was allocated $52 million. These funds were allocated to assist state, local, tribal, and territorial government in responding to the pandemic. This fund will increase over $14.45 million from the previous fiscal year. This increase accounts for all of the City Council approved allocations for public health, youth and workforce development, administration, revenue replacement, and Saginaw County. This fund also accounts for ARPA dollars received from other entities for joint projects, and that would be found in your Saginaw County line. Also new is the State of Michigan Downtown Saginaw Medical Facility Fund, which can be found on page 231 to 232. This fund is to recognize grant funds received on December 23rd of 2023 from the State of Michigan 2024 Department of Labor Economic Opportunity Grant. The initial amount received is $30.3 million to implement critical infrastructure improvements for the development of the medical facility and to improve the health in the city of Saginaw. For fiscal year 25, this fund will be budgeted at $12 million. These funds will be utilized for environmental assessment work, the contract with Studio Gang for architectural design, and for preliminary engineering services. The unfunded liability fund can be found on page 233 to 234. The unfunded liability fund will be $178,000 for fiscal year 25, which is the same as in the previous fiscal year. These funds are additional funds allocated to the city's OPEB obligation. The capital project fund, found on page 235 to 237, the capital project fund accounts for the financial resources that are used for long-term investment projects requiring large sums to acquire, develop, improve, and/or maintain capital assets. Generally, revenues are received through transfers from the general, streets, and rubbish collection funds. In fiscal year 24, the city allocated over $3.4 million to this fund to assist with the city hall renovation projects. For fiscal year 25, the budget will be $3.91 million, and this increase will recognize the funds allocated for the renovation project. Moving on to the next fund type. The next fund type being the enterprise funds. Enterprise funds account for services provided to the public on a user charge basis. The total amount of these funds is $99.86 million, or 43% of the total citywide budget. These funds will increase 22%, or $18 million from the fiscal year 24 budget. Starting on page 238 to 240, we'll find the boat launch fund. And the boat launch fund will be budgeted for fiscal year 25 at $25,000, which is the same as in the previous fiscal year. On page 241 to 257, you will find the Sewer Operation and Maintenance Fund. The Sewer Operation and Maintenance Fund will increase $6.11 million for a total of $38.28 million. This increase is due to increase in planned capital purchases and capital improvements, as well as debt service payment. These planned projects include the Hancock CSO repair project and the river crossing project. In addition, the following items will increase as well: general liability insurance costs due to current market conditions, information management charges as the city is moving to a cloud-based platform, fuel, streets and road materials, pavement patching and street patching, sewer cleaning and televising with repairs, chemicals, parts and supplies, indirect cost allocation, utilities, water and sewer, general repairs, construction projects, motor vehicle repairs, motor pool charges, and engineering services. The department also adds an engineering technician asset management to the personnel complement. For a more detailed explanation of the changes in the fund, please refer to the presentation created by Mike Grenier and Phil Carwat on the Sewer and Water Operation Maintenance Fund. Starting on page 258 to 275, you will find the Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. The Water Operation and Maintenance Fund will increase $11.89 million for a total of $61.55 million. This increase is due to increase in planned capital purchases and capital improvement projects, as well as debt service payments. These planned projects include the elevated storage tank, lead and copper and galvanizing line replacement, and Birch Run parallel water main. In addition, there will be increases in the following: increases to general liability insurance costs due to the current market conditions, fuel, chemicals, pavement patching, street patching, parts and supplies, motor vehicle repairs, motor pool charges, the indirect cost allocation, engineering services for the surplus division, and increase in planned construction projects to include joint projects such as sewer improvement and constructions. For more detailed explanation of the changes in this fund, please refer to the presentation created by Mike Grenier and Philip Carwat on the Sewer and Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. Moving on to the next fund type is our internal service fund. And our internal service fund accounts for goods and services provided to one department by another on a cost reimbursement basis. Internal service funds can be found on page 276 to 308. And in this chart shows a breakdown of each internal service fund within the city. The total budget for the fund type equates to $9.87 million. This is an increase of $800,354 from the previous fiscal year. Starting with the Public Works Building Fund, found on page 276 to 282, this fund's expenditures are used to maintain the Public Works building for those divisions and departments that reside in the facility. This main source of revenues for this fund is fees for services or rents that are charged to the division that occupies space in the building. The budget for this year will be $612,716. This is an increase of $30,248 from the previous fiscal year. This is a result of an increase in personnel costs and general liability insurance. Next is the Department of Technical Services. There are two funds that are a part of the Department of Technical Services: the Geographical Information System, or GIS, and the Information Services System, or IS. Starting on page 281 to 284 is the Technical Services GIS Fund. And the Technical Services GIS Fund is projected to be $375,113 for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of $7,936 from the previous year. This increase in this fund is primarily due to increased salaries and healthcare benefit costs across the board. On page 285 to 288, you will find Technical Services IS. The Technical Services IS Fund generates revenues mostly through charges for services for the maintenance support for all computers, computer software, phones, and printers. A small portion of the revenues come from sales. Revenues from these charges will be $2.15 million in fiscal year 25. This represents an increase of $148,499 from the previous year. This increase is attributed to the purchasing of computer software. Moving on to the Radio Operation Fund, which is on page 289 to 292, the Radio Operation Fund generates revenues through fees charged to user departments for maintaining and replacing radios. Revenues received in this fund will allow for the city to acquire, install, and maintain two-way radio equipment. The total Radio Operation Fund will be $125,799 for fiscal year 25. This is an increase of $5,909. This increase is due to the across-the-board increases in salary and healthcare benefits. Next is the Motor Pool Operation Funds, and this can be found on page 293 to 298. The Motor Pool Operation Fund accounts for the acquisition and maintenance of vehicles and other motorized equipment. The only exception is the fire department, which requires specialized services for their trucks. The Motor Pool Operation Fund will increase $230,811 from the prior fiscal year. This increase will be realized in increases in the motor vehicle supplies and motor vehicle repair costs, as well as the purchase of a shop truck through the municipal buyback replacement program. The self-insurance fund can be found on page 299 to 303. And the self-insurance fund accounts for the payment of insurance premiums and records the insurance claim liability and distribution of insurance costs to other city funds. The self-insurance fund for fiscal year 25 is projected to be $2.27 million, and this is an increase of $410,588, which is due to an increase in insurance rates in the national market because of nationwide economic conditions. On page 304 to 308, you will find the Workers' Compensation Fund. The worker compensation revenues are based on a percentage of gross wage for a full-time employee. The city utilizes the median of industry rates to determine the percentage to assess to each employee by job classification. Saginaw Bay underwriters assist the city with determining these rates. Revenues for this fund will be $1.41 million, and this total fund will decrease by $33,637 for fiscal year 25. This reduction is due to a lesser amount allocated to increase in fund equity. The last fund type is our fiduciary funds. And the fiduciary funds account for the administration of property or assets that are owned by other entities besides the city. Starting on page 309 to 314, you will find the cemetery endowment funds. The total of all fiduciary funds is projected to be $34,910 and is found in the cemetery endowment funds. The cemetery endowment funds accounts for legally restricted resources. 25% of the cemetery revenues allocated in the general fund are split and recognized in these funds. These revenues can only be used for cemetery care purposes in accordance with the city charter. The endowment funds are projected to stay the same as in the previous fiscal year. Thank you for the presentation. If you have any questions, please contact us. You can email ybland@saginaw-mi.com or call 989-759-1784.